what concerned me about reading this was this idea of valorizing the diminution of desire, right? And wondering, are we going to a kind of anorexia of the spirit?
Hey everybody, welcome to the People Fuss podcast. My name is Doug Daniels.
And I'm Carrie Prince.
And we are here to discuss
the fuss
about
people. Unpacking the headlines and stories around the human connection and disconnection we experience in life, in love, and in leadership. Today's topic, we're talking about the connection to our bodies and to other bodies. And there is a drug that is all the buzz lately.
A whole family of drugs.
Known
as GLP-1s, like Ozempic, that, is gracing us with so many gaunted jawlines.
That's right. And we have a wonderful guest joining us to lend her voice and unique perspective to this topic. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Stephanie Peirolo as our guest today. She's a fellow executive coach, a celebrated author, podcaster, storyteller. She's also a very wise and knowledgeable friend that I've gotten some really sage advice from on more than one occasion. I think about what she says to me quite a bit. She writes a fantastic weekly newsletter on Substack called Fierce Grace and hosts her own podcast called The Bad Boss Brief, which is also very fun and great. Highly recommend. What's unique about Stephanie is that she bridges the worlds of business, faith, and personal transformation in a way that I find very accessible and refreshing. She's written a book called The Saint and the Drunk. Very good title, by the way. And it's all about the process of discernment, which we're going to get into with her a little bit today. How to make any big decision in your life. And that's where I think this topic is interesting, because the decision to change your body is a really hard one. And it takes a lot of fortitude and sacrifice sometimes. And commitment, yes. Sometimes commitment you don't want to make if it's like doctor recommended. And so there can be pitfalls and trade-offs and things that we're not, especially when it comes to like pharma stuff, like we don't always know what we're getting our bodies into. And there can be unexpected consequences there. So no one better to unpack this current GLP-1 situation than the effervescent Stephanie Peirolo. Stephanie, hello.
Ooh, yay. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Wonderful. Well, Doug, just before we get started with Stephanie, can you tell us a little bit about GLP-1s for someone who's been living under a rock?
Oh, yes. Well, GLP-1s are a class of drugs, but most commonly referred to in the media as a brand name of Ozempic. I'm sure we've all seen and heard of Ozempic in the news. These are glucagon-like peptide 1 medications. That's what.
Thank you, doctor.
Yeah, that's what GLP-1 stands for. Now you know why they call it GLP-1 instead of.
Which I actually always forget that acronym. I'm like, it's GPL. Wait, no, LP. No, what is it?
It's still easier to remember than glucagon-like peptide 1.
But Ozempic has that like zing where you remember it. It's a good drug name because you remember it.
Yeah, but it's originally a diabetes medication meant to regulate insulin levels and glucagon,
response to sugar.
Yes, exactly. And also had some side effects of reducing appetite significantly, so much so that it became a weight loss drug, essentially. So.
Yeah. And this stuff in the news about it, and I mean, Stephanie, you could speak to this too. There's all sorts of research in other applications. They're looking at it for mental health, for aging, and a lot of people, we've seen in the news that especially celebrities seem to be like voluntarily taking it when they have no issues with response to sugar. And I think what's been troubling people in the news is how thin, especially so many celebrities have gotten. Stephanie, what's your take on what's happening with this drug and what the side effects are?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm certainly not a doctor, and I do have friends who have taken GLP-1s, friends with diabetes who have taken it, who have had really fantastic results. So GLP-1s, when used as prescribed for diabetes or weight loss, nothing wrong with that. I think what concerns me is some of the cultural dialogue around the reduction of appetite. right? So my book, The Saint and the Drunk, the saint is Saint Ignatius of Loyola, who lived in the Middle Ages and came up with this idea of discernment, which is a spiritual, intentional way to make decisions. And in my book, I kind of adapt that for people who are not religious as a concept. And one of the cornerstones of Ignatius's process is something called the application of the senses. And it is a particular way of meditating. And as I was writing the book and thinking about discernment, I realized the cornerstone of making decisions isn't actually in our minds, it's in our bodies. And that in order to make effective decisions, we have to be in touch with what I call the genius of the body. And if
I love that phrase. I love that phrase.
Thank you. And if you think about it, think about our language, the way we talk about our emotions and our bodies as the seat of our emotion. I got cold feet. I had butterflies in my stomach. I was heartbroken. Our language automatically makes that connection between what happens in our body and what we feel and how we move through the world. And I realized the genius of the body is what guides us to make decisions that are authentic to us. And I thought to myself, because I was talking to a friend of mine who's a man who was on GLP-1s, and he said, it was amazing. I used to do a lot of online shopping, and ever since I started taking GLP-1s, I stopped doing shopping for things I didn't need. And then I read an interview with Oprah Winfrey where she talked about being on GLP-1s, and her appetite for alcohol just diminished. Now, again, these are not bad things. I myself am a recovering alcoholic. I wish somebody could have given me a pill when I got sober and I would have had no cravings for alcohol. What concerned me about reading this was this idea of valorizing the diminution of desire, right? And wondering, are we going to a kind of anorexia of the spirit? And in doing so, are we cutting ourselves off from a really vital way of getting understanding? And I was thinking of like a sailboat. Like if you have no rudder, no tiller, you have no way to steer, you're going to flounder all over the place. And what if we look at our bodies as a source of really valuable information? Is cutting ourselves off from food noise and desire in general, how far does that go? I don't know. I've never taken the drug, but that's what made me curious. And that's why I wrote about in my Substack about this.
That's interesting. So there's evidence that it can help with addictive tendencies as well as craving for appetite and stuff?
I mean, I know that there are some research efforts that are going on right now to find out if it can be helpful for drug addicts and alcoholics, which again, that's lovely. But I think what we're talking about is there are people who are talking openly about taking GLP-1s who are not diabetic. They are not obese. They are not alcoholics or addicts. They are microdosing through an app to lose weight and paying, to get some sort of like telehealth medicine, which again, do what you want to do. What concerns me is the cultural conversation that is normalizing this kind of pharmacological intervention on what is a very natural appetite.
Yeah, it's the shortcut to Buddhahood. You just take a pill, lose all desire, and enlightenment.
I have a friend who's on them as well, and she would say things like, "Oh, I just forget to eat." And there was a part of me that was so sad because I was at her house. She had made this like beautiful cheese platter, and she wasn't enjoying it with me. And like the enjoyment of it, I was like, so are we never gonna like get excited for delicious food together again? Like in my mind, kind of what you're saying of like, oh, I think we might have tipped the scale too far the other way. Because when I hear you say like there's these really good aspects and they help with, let's say like something like, let's say that appetite is the issue for some of these folks. Oprah had also said she realizes she can never be off the drug now. It is a lifetime thing because what they're finding is that people that are using it to lose weight, when they stop the drug, they gain it back 4 times faster than someone who's doing it with diet and exercise. It is that appetite thing comes rushing back, and you can't control it without this drug. And so the psychological work of what you actually do in a different way, if that was the issue, and you're not controlling, something chemical in your system. I mean, I'm sure there's an argument to be made too for something that led to diabetes over time, being held back, and that being a reason. But just the idea that this joy part of food was like, oh, I don't care about it anymore. I don't find joy in thinking about eating a chocolate bar anymore. And I was like, oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. You know what this reminds me of too is this side effect that never really got a lot of news except to say, oh, that's so weird, huh? Imagine that, like the sense of taste from COVID, and how some people lost their sense of taste.
Stephanie, did that happen to you?
No, thank God.
Oh, that happened to me, and I was like, why live? Why live if I can't taste food?
Yeah, that would be horrible. What a life. Like, you can't enjoy food anymore. That's one of the carnal pleasures. Like, that's,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also, if we are talking about GLP-1s as kind of the new designer accessory wellness, bauble, right? It's the Labubu of the pharma world right now. And everybody wants it, and they're talking about getting it more available. It's very expensive. It's very difficult to get insurance to cover it if you don't have diabetes. What is more interesting to me, because if you're going to talk about weight and perception, Doug, you brought it up at the beginning. This is something that to me really intersects with feminism and what it is like to be a woman who's moving through the world. And, the notion, so I was coming of age in the 70s, and there was, as there always are, a style of body that was considered to be the ideal. And the style of body was long blonde hair, large breasts, and no ass whatsoever. And I was... And I was and still am an ass haver. And
yes, ass havers.
And so it was discouraging to me to see these images in the media, but this was the 70s. There was no social media, right? There was no, kids in middle school were not getting plastic surgery. People, if they were dieting, it wasn't anything that was aided by drugs, at least in my little world in Los Angeles. And what I realize now is that these images with social media, these images of these emaciated, usually women, are being broadcast to, very young girls on social media as the kind of ideal. And what is the impact of that? What is the impact of the idea of thinness being conflated not just with wellness and health, but beauty, desirability, access to power, and even in some cases, spirituality? Right. And having written a book on spiritual themes, I'm like, oh, no. Do not do the skinny girls get to go to heaven. No.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it's gone back and forth since I was a child, because we kind of just came off of this like body acceptance movement and love the body you're in movement. And even you come from a marketing background, like Dove and all these brands were like, we're going to go hard on this and let people accept their bodies for what they are. Almost all of the like clothing brands in my feed use normal bodies now. And it's so much easier to understand what clothing will look like on me. It's like, it's such a relief. I tell them all the time, like I look for brands where they're using normal bodies now, because it's such a relief when I'm shopping to understand what real people look like in them. I find it really disturbing when I still see brands that are doing what I consider to be the 90s thing, where they're like using really skinny people that are like size 0 and our height, because Stephanie and I are both tall. And I was like, well, that's not, that's not a realistic portrayal of most people. It's this like extreme thing you see on a runway. So it's just interesting. It's coming on the heels of this like pretty long and somewhat successful campaign that a lot of brands jumped on to try and accept larger bodies. Isn't that weird?
It comes at a really interesting as in bad timing time in our society too, when we're kind of reevaluating. Sections of our society seem to have been reevaluating the whole DEI and affirmative action thing, and so now we're also
Right.
regressing in the body positivity.
And we've got the Mar-a-Lago face going on.
Mar-a-Lago face, you know, the Stepford wife MAGA ideal of the trad wife sort of person. So yeah, it seems like in a lot of ways we're kind of going backwards into the 1950s, because back then it was like literally speed, wasn't it?
Yeah, speed pills. Housewives were.
Except what's different, what I think now is different, is there really is a political component to this, right?
Yeah, tell us more about that.
So Kate Mann, who's a philosopher, she has a great Substack. I can't remember the name of it right now, but Manne. Kate Mann writes about something called conspicuous compliance, which is that the women will demonstrate their worth to get access to power by having plastic surgery, right? So the women in the Trump administration who have that Mar-a-Lago face were not born that way. Right? They paid for it. They had a scalpel on their skin to make them, to reconstruct their face to comply. And so conspicuous compliance, the Tressie McMillan Cottom talks about this, and that the idea, the obviousness of the plastic surgery is the point. What you're saying is, not only do I have the money to do this, I am conspicuously complying. I am saying that I deserve to be adjacent to power, because the other thing that Cottom says is the only power women are allowed to have in our society is beauty. And that is fleeting. You have it when you are young, and then it goes away when you're older. Every other kind of power a woman can have is very fraught. So the idea of saying, let's get half of the population to be really focused on being thin, cutting themselves off from being grounded in their body, less strength. GLP-1s are notorious for getting rid of muscle mass. Right? So you're supposed to eat a lot of protein because you lose all of your muscle. And as somebody who goes to the gym regularly to try to lift more weight, I don't want that. And then, you know, women are getting so focused on modifying their body. Like the latest surgery is women having their ribs removed at the bottom of the rib cage so that they have more of an hourglass figure. And again, yes, women have done this for generations. They have had super tight corsets. There's always been ways in which women have altered their bodies. But there does seem to be the availability of plastic surgery and almost sort of the urgency around demonstrating your conspicuous compliance. It feels new and different and very much of a time when women's bodies are being oppressed. I mean, like, women in a lot of states in this country can no longer decide whether or not they want to carry a pregnancy to term.
Yeah.
So let's convince them not to worry about that, but to think about whether or not they want to get a rib removed.
Yeah, and the easy breeziness of injections and things like that starting at a really young age to prevent aging, like the idea that getting older or looking older, there's all these comparisons with like the Golden Girls show, they were this age and they looked like they were this age, and nowadays look at the Desperate Housewives who are the same age, and there's all these comparisons of like the fear of aging. And do you think GLP-1s and the mania around them is sort of dipping into that as well, this aging fear thing?
I mean, there definitely is a lot of ageism. I am 63 years old, and I definitely notice that people, particularly in a professional capacity, treat me differently than they did when I was 43 or 53. A lot of friends that I know who work in advertising, which is where I've worked in and around for many years, men and women, they're done by 50. Right. And women maybe even a little bit earlier. So ageism is a problem. There is an assumption that women who are older and postmenopausal are going to carry extra weight. And so if you look thinner, then that's considered to make you look younger. And studies have shown that single women who are in their 50s and older feel as if they are competing for, if they are dating men, that they're competing with men who are dating women who are 10, 20 years younger.
Well, and coming from matchmaking world, it's not that they feel that, it's that they are. I mean, I can validate that fear, having interviewed many men in their 50s saying they just don't date their age.
They're young at heart, Carrie.
They're always so young at heart.
They always get along with younger women.
Yeah, for some crazy reason.
It's such a coincidence.
Yeah.
And so there is a association with women who are older and having extra weight and not caring about themselves. There's a whole bunch of narratives around aging. There's no doubt. And I think the idea of GLP-1s are going to counteract that if you look very thin. The challenge is a lot of women who take these drugs also say they lose weight and they become gaunt in the face. And so they show more wrinkles. And so there's this whole calibration of, okay, I want to lose enough weight so that I'm thin in my jeans, but I don't want to lose so much weight that my wrinkles show because I can't get any more fillers.
What a
and
world.
my feeling is like, the world is on fire.
Yeah.
Step away from your skincare routine and
God,
pick
yeah.
up a protest sign. Call your senator.
Stephanie!
What a vain calculus. Like, oh, how much weight? But the wrinkles.
Yeah.
And
But it's also, I mean, I understand that we want to control something, right? And I mean, I have a skincare routine. It is fun for me. And it was recommended to me by a 16-year-old who basically said, these are the 15 Korean products you have to buy. And I bought 5 and
Love
I
it.
apply them religiously. I think the idea is patriarchy wants women to not be aware of the power that they have. And so they want them to be distracted by other things. And if you are distracted by other things because it's fun and you like watching Desperate Housewives and you want to have a 15-step skincare process, fantastic. But if your sense of worth and value in the world is tied up with whether or not you are attractive to every man, that's going to be problematic, right? So I read this thing that was really interesting to me. There's this woman, I think it's Ailey Jolie. She's a psychotherapist, and she was writing about what she calls the soma of surveillance, that as women, we are always surveilled from the time we are very young. And she talks about a study written, there was a 1980 essay by a woman named Iris Marion Young. And she talked about the fact that women are policed from the time they're very young, right? And that the reason we throw like girls is because we were told not to take up too much space with our bodies. Don't be better than the boys. Don't be too loud. Don't let your bra strap show. You know, when women were sexually assaulted, the question often was, and I think still is, what were you wearing? Right? That women and so I think this idea that as women, our bodies are always seen as the property of someone else, right? Like how many times, I mean, I certainly have had lots of men say, why don't you put a smile on that face, right? You know, like you should be smiling, or if I cuss, like you kiss your mother with that face, like, I'm sorry, you are not my priest or my father, and so I think that understanding that society has always policed how we are in our bodies, and the idea of like, what does that do to us as grown women, as young women, as children? Like, what is that doing to my 6-year-old granddaughter, and more importantly, how do I prevent that?
Yeah, especially because when I think of examples for myself, things that have stuck with me over time, for me in particular, I was blessed with a lot of confidence when I was young. I think I had a mother who just like let me run wild. I usually was like playing kickball with the boys, and I never had a problem being loud and proud. Probably, third child syndrome a little bit, but the things that stick with me that I can remember right off the top of my head that have been told to me about how I look are from women, and it feels like it's from their own their own cracks in the foundation, right? Like I remember when I first started getting gray hair, which I've just let grow in. I don't really care that much about it because I don't know. I like it. I think it's pretty. He has gray hair too, and we were just like into it. And I remember I think I was still, I was like in my mid 30s, I think probably like 36, 35, 36. And I had some streaks of gray hair coming in. And I think one of the women from the production that I was working on came in and told me I was brave. And I was like, thank you. Like, what? What's wrong with you? That's how I feel. I always put it back on them like, ooh, you got something wrong with you. I'm not brave. You're sad. I don't know. It's like, I think of things women have said or that women are scared of, more so for me in my experience than men telling me. The smile thing only came from men, I will say. Ugh, but
well, and I've had women do that too. It's always in the ladies' room for some reason. They tell me I'm brave to have gray hair, but I'm also brave to have short hair. I have had women in the rest stop in rural Washington State tell me my husband would never let me have short hair.
yeah, I think my dad felt that way about my mom, actually.
Wow.
You know, and I'm like, yeah, well, girl, it's been a long time since a man has told me what to do with my hairstyle. But
60 years, give or take.
yeah, but I do think that we need to understand the nexus of those different things, right? That like we are policed, therefore we police others. We internalize this, and it leads to eating disorders and all of these other sort of difficulties. And I think you get you get back to something that's interesting. So when you look at the political situation right now, what is it that people in power don't want to have happen? They don't want us to think about what is happening to our world and take action. They don't want us to be in community, and they don't want us to be angry. And if you think about sharing food with someone else, that is a primal way to, and they don't want us to have joy, right? We're supposed to be oppressed by every onslaught of terrible news or terrible crazy. Desire is where we build community, build connection, and experience joy. Like, think about how many times you talked about it, enjoying a cheese board with a friend or wanting to enjoy that. Think how many times, I come from a big Italian family, and the idea of like spooning stuff up on a fork and handing it to someone you love and saying, oh my God, you have to taste this.
Douglas
it is
has
the
a big
best
Italian
thing
family
ever.
too, and I love going to their house with it's like massive holidays and wonderful food and drinks. So I get a little bit of that big Italian family at his family's house.
Yeah,
But it's that joy, right? The
Yeah.
joy of gathering together, drinking, eating, celebrating.
It's not just about that it is for that for me, but it's also about using desire as a motivating factor almost, like the commandment, don't envy your neighbor. Well, sometimes envy can lead us to better ourselves, right? Like sometimes you can look at something and say, I want to be able to afford to eat at that fancy restaurant or something. I'm going to save my money, or I'm going to go learn a new skill because I want to be this or that. I think, these emotions aren't inherently evil, desire and envy. It's really how they're used to motivate you in your life. I think that's important.
Yeah, I think desire is fuel. Think of every love song, every play, every sonnet was written from the basis of some kind of desire, often lust, a carnal desire.
I want to hold your hand.
Yeah, we have so many great works of art that are based on desire.
Yep.
I know Doug was asking when we were talking about this topic a little bit in our like pregame session. He was like, "Why is it that it is these like extreme desire places, not like it like the desire for, let's say like gluttony, not just food, but to like be so full you almost feel sick. The desire to be so satisfied sexually that you're out of your mind, crazy. The desire, like these things where like we think of the extreme, and that's where, especially in religious spaces, those extremes are what they're trying to speak to. But in speaking to those, they sort of like damn the whole thing, and we're like, no, I can have chocolate.
I mean, yes and no. So I think it depends on the religious tradition. So religion is often used to enforce the patriarchy and the dominant culture. And so it takes
speaking
on
Doug's language right now. He's like, yes.
and so one of the ways to do that is to create an environment of scarcity and fear, right? It's easier to control people by saying, if you don't do these things, you're going to burn in hell. Right? And so there's that, but I think it also depends on the religious tradition. Like certainly the Puritans were very much pleasure is bad, but Catholics and Jews, they're all about pleasure. Like it's all about like eating, drinking, dancing, singing, having sex, and it is. And I can speak mostly to the Catholic tradition.
Great sex, anyway.
Married straight sex.
But I do think that the idea is that, yes, there are guardrails around what is dogmatically permissible. But the idea is that it is sacramental, right? So C.S. Lewis, I think, has a really great way of thinking about it. And he says that all good things come from God, right? Food, sex, jumping in a cold river, puppies, like everything good comes from God. Sometimes we can misuse it, but stealing of the apple is bad, he says, but it doesn't make the sweetness of the apple bad. And I really like that. And I really think that there are aspects of, religious traditions that celebrate the joy of physicality.
What was Jesus's first miracle?
Turning water into wine.
There you go.
Jesus is always cooking for people. He's like,
washing feet and cooking all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he's doing, and people, he feeds a crowd of thousands with, loaves and fishes. And so I think that there's very much a almost perversion of saying this, like the Puritan idea of a divine who is withholding, gonna, like scold you, you're gonna go to hell for infractions you don't really understand. Like my understanding of the divine is plenty, community, like, let me give you all the gifts I can possibly rain down because so much of being in the world is horrible and awful. Let's at least have hot cocoa and orgasms. Right?
Preferably at the same time.
Ouch. That could be dangerous.
I have to bring this up because I'm a history nerd, and I've been thinking about it since we started talking about patriarchy and women's bodies and weight loss and all of these things. And this has been going on in human society since there's been a society. One of the earliest recovered archaeological relics is the Venus of Willendorf. And it's just this little figure of a plump woman, no head. I don't remember if it was like broken or whatever, but it was just exaggerated breasts, exaggerated vulva, just exaggerated features of femininity. And so this has been a conversation that we could have had at any given point in history about patriarchy, the male gaze, women's bodies.
I know, but what's the line between celebration and, negative feelings about the gaze, because you can make, do we know who made that?
We don't know the name, no. Ak and Choglog.
Yeah, because we wouldn't have those feelings of a woman's trying to celebrate all the different women's bodies. You know what I mean? It's the context of the thing for me.
But there's also the other things that intersect with that. So generally, markers of wealth are considered to be desirable, right? So there were many times in history where the women who were curvier had access to more food, and it was the poor women who were skinny, right?
Fat and so was used to be the
and so that's what, because you didn't, and then it was, if you're working in an office or a Burger King, you can't get outside, so you're pale, so you want to be tan, and it was the tan women who were affluent, the ones who could do jazzercise or whatever, that got
vacation
thin.
In the Bahamas,
right? And I think you also, you brought this up before, but you also have to look at the way that the bodies of women who are not white are treated. Right? Are they celebrated? Are they co-opted? Are white women getting, various kinds of plastic surgeries so they can look? the whole Kardashian situation.
I was going to bring up Kardashians 5 times in this thing, and then my heart exploded with sadness, and I.
But it's that notion that there's and I think that's what concerns me about the GLP-1 discussion is it is flattened as if we are only talking about weight loss masquerading as wellness, when we are really talking about power, race, access to power, so many other things that, and I just think we need to be aware that we're talking about all those things whenever we talk about bodies.
Yeah. The shortcut aspect of it is, I think, some part of me that has like this, I call it my grandpa grit. There's some part of me that likes to do things the hard way and then celebrate that I can do it that way. There's like some little bitchy part of me that likes to do things the hard way. Like if we're playing a game, I'm going to play it without any like, if we're bowling, there's no bumpers kind of thing. You know what I mean? And so there's something about this for people like, that again have access and power that make it seem so easy, and even for people that maybe need it quite desperately for whatever reasons and don't have access to it, like it also gets at this thing where like the people that have the most opportunity to do something the hard way or don't have to do it that way. I don't know, there's some fairness thing that's like in there somewhere for me.
Well, and it also plays into the injustice in our healthcare system or lack thereof. Like another thing that Tressie McMillan Cottom said is something to the effect of like, it's in a lot of states, it's easier to get plastic surgery, to get fillers than it is to get a mammogram.
Oh, that is so depressing. And
right?
Oh, that's depressing. Oh.
And so I think that recognizing like a lot of the people that want to get those GLP-1s can't because it's too expensive or their insurance doesn't cover it or they have to jump through, a whole bunch of different hoops.
Well, and there's a psychological aspect to it that, I remember my mom said something to me when I was in my 20s. I was chubbier for sure. I was dancing a lot and I was a very like healthy person, but I just had a lot more weight on me in my 20s because I think I was just eating too much. I was enjoying life quite a bit, but I didn't feel like I wasn't in despair all the time about it. I just knew, and I know like I had more weight on me then. And I remember my mom, I was like just talking to my mom very gently. Like my mom and I have very honest conversations about bodies and weight. It's never in a judgy zone. It's always in just like a this is real and what it is zone. And she was just telling me like, she was like, as soon as you have something that like it, is like taking up your time, that's not the enjoyment of food, it'll come off, like, because that's kind of what happened for her. And sure enough, it's like as I got older, I just started to work on that psychological practice of like, am I turning to food to fill an emotional void? Because I'm bored, because I had to do that psychological work for myself over years. And I think I'm in a pretty good place about it now where I feel, I don't know, Doug can speak to how I am about it maybe more, but I did the work of what that was for me and why I was overeating a little bit or indulging a little too much for those years. And I wouldn't take them back, by the way. If I could go back, like, I think that was the proper process. But if I could just take a shortcut, would I have done that work?
But I think the idea too is to recognize like that all bodies are different, right? So like I had a roommate who was fat. That is how she describes herself. And this was years ago, and I was like, well, I mean, obviously when we're living together, she's going to eat a lot more food than I do. And she ate, I am not exaggerating, half the food and calories that I ate. And that was a really good lesson for me to realize, like, it's not about, for a lot of people, it's not about eating better. It's about genetic destiny. And that they have the body that they have. And so how do we make it so that people feel like they can show up in the body they have, right? So I wrote this article that was in The Guardian a couple of months ago about this crazy experience I had when I was in my 30s and really into diet culture and feeling like I wasn't okay in my body and all those things, right? And I was at the Oregon Country Fair, which is this real hippie thing in Oregon. I was out in the woods for the weekend, and the only place to shower was an open shower area with like 50 other people.
Oof.
And I had never been naked with 50 other people before in the woods.
I haven't either to this day.
First time for everything.
But what was great about it is I had that image in my mind of like, there is one kind of ideal body, and I don't have it. And when you're showering with 50 people, there were children, there were disabled people, there were elderly people. There was one guy who was so disabled he had to be carried by his friends. He couldn't even walk. And realizing like all the different kinds of shoulders and necks and breasts and there was something really spiritual for me about that, to recognize like every body is fundamentally different and there is no standard. Like this is not a test on which we are being graded. And it was really helpful for me to sort of move away from diet culture because I'm now in a phase of life. I am postmenopausal. I don't weigh what I weighed when I was in my 30s and 40s because the estrogen has left the building. And there are times where I have to really struggle and be like, why can't I weigh what? It's like, no, that's not the question. The question is, what is happening in my brain that makes me feel like my very healthy, very fit body is not okay because you can look at me and realize that I'm not 45, right?
Yeah. I think that kind of goes back to what we were saying with like there was this. Certainly there were lots of conversations about the word health for a while in the body positivity movement, for lack of a better. Is that a real movement? I think it is. I don't know. But there were lots of conversations about health. I'm big on like deep diving into comments on things all the time. I tell them like, oh no, I'm on this comment thread and like seeing how people feel about this thing. And people are always bringing up like, it's not about that, it's about health. And this word health is still being thrown around with GLP-1s in these ways that are even coming from people where I'm like, really? You're gonna suddenly switch gears, very like hard right turn, going from like I'm happy and healthy in this body to then being 50 pounds lighter and saying, oh, I'd made this change because of health. And I was like, I thought 6 months ago you were saying you loved yourself. I don't get it. Like both things could be true, but in the same context and within the same year, suddenly 50 pounds lighter is about health when you were fine before. I don't get it.
There's a lot of this wouldn't be a topic for this podcast, but I've been thinking a lot about what these body standards mean for men and the rise in testosterone, artificial, growth hormones, and even the surgeries that some men are doing to like make themselves taller, the most excruciating like shin lengthening things. So yeah, there's a lot of bad psychology going on about people's bodies and how comfortable they feel in them.
And the online world, I mean, especially we talk about this in the dating world, specifically for young men who are getting like unrealistic portrayals of bodies and sex and everything from a screen for their formative years, and then not really knowing how to deal with real bodies in real time and real pleasure and that kind of stuff. And I think that's a real scare.
Yeah.
And then, why we don't assign that to women too, I think is crazy. They're also it's not like they're getting all the right training and boys are getting all the wrong training. I think they're all getting weird stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, not everybody is hung like a porn star. I mean, that's another, and it's like, and the thing you learn when you get older too, is like women don't want that.
Yeah.
As it turns out, because So there's a lot of things that you don't learn until you're older about, all of these things about human desire and
But I think we also could do a better job in just having an awareness of what we talk about and what we don't talk about, right? Like I grew up and I would hear my mom and her sisters talking about dieting all the time. And my daughter and I never talk about weight or dieting in front of the grandkids because they don't need to grow up with that. They don't, it's hard enough being a boy or girl in this culture. Like, and I think that there is sort of hopefully an awareness of like different kinds of bodies, different ways of being, and just, I don't know. I like going back to that idea of like my body is my guide. Source of pleasure, source of aches and pains, like seat of desire. Desire is fuel. Like, what if I reframe the narratives that I carry about what I've been told about what I get to do and be, and how I get to age, or all those things? Like, it seems to me like that is interesting. The only problem is it's not lucrative. Wellness is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's not a lot of money in me saying to people, I mean, yeah, you can buy my book, but it's like, yeah, get in touch with a genius of your body and like be true to yourself. Like I'm not selling supplements to do that. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say like what all that you were just talking about reminded me so much of some of the parts of your book where you talk about that part of the discernment process. And because from my, experience of your book, it was like it takes you through these different like windows into yourself and into your needs and into your life. Like it compartmentalizes all these different things and how you make decisions and look through, like putting on a different set of glasses of yourself and making sure you're looking through all of them when you're making this decision. And this connection to your body part, like coming from a dance background and a modern dance background my whole life, I had a great connection to, I think, my body from an early age, and the way that you put it, for especially for someone who maybe has never connected to that, I thought was such a wonderful and brilliant thing for anybody who's never used that as a decision-making tool. Like, that alone, I think, is worth getting the book for people who don't know what I'm talking about.
Oh, well, thank you. And, you know, it's interesting because when I do the book, I'll do it as a retreat. And I was doing a retreat last spring, and it was mostly women and of all ages.
45 naked people this time at the...
No, they all had their clothes on. They all had their clothes on. But they were from like women from 20 to 85, right? And I said, what I want you to think about is, what do you want? Like, whatever you're going to discern, I want the question to start with, I want. And there was this like ripple of discomfort. And I'm like, you get to want things. And really, like that, it was interesting to me that there was that sort of dissonance, because wanting is seated in the body. Like, what do you want to eat? What do you want to drink? Who do you want to have sex with? What do you want to wear? Like, all of those things are in the body. And the idea of saying what I want matters. What I want is mine to own, and it deserves attention. It deserves honor, is really kind of countercultural at this point.
I think that's true. What a lovely note for us to wrap this up on. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation about weight loss and drugs and sex and rock and roll. No.
And naked women.
And naked people. No, I mean, I cannot, impress upon our listeners enough. Please pick up a copy of The Saint and the Drunk by Stephanie Peirolo. It is lovely. It is going to walk you through this discernment process in a way that feels really, like you just said, in a way that honors yourself. I think that is a great way to put it. So thank you for joining us today on this conversation. It's such a pleasure to have you. I can't wait to talk again.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of People Fuss. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and of course, fuss around in the comment section on YouTube.
People Fuss is a tight-knit production written and produced by yours truly, Carrie Prince.
And Doug Daniels.
If you want to support conversations that create connection and promote progressive and human-centered stories, visit patreon.com/peoplefuss and become one of our monthly supporters. Or you could even just throw us a one-time donation.
Or you could throw us a 10-time donation. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed this episode as much as our cats enjoyed annoying us from behind that closed door.
Such whiners. All right. Until the next one.
Bye.
Bye.